Thank you, Senator Van. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I'm really pleased to speak on the Wine Australia Amendment Bill 2019 because I'm a big supporter of the wine industry in Australia, especially in South Australia. So I'm always going to be pleased to support legislation which will make the work of this important industry easier. And credit where credit's due, this bill does do that. To be clear, the Wine Australia Amendment Bill 2019 aims to amend the Wine Australia Act 2013 to enable Wine Australia to establish and maintain a publicly available directory of great product labels intended for export. The purpose of the label directory is to deter exports of copycat wine from Australia. This bill does not give Wine Australia the power to protect the intellectual property rights of wine brand owners. However, it will better facilitate wine brand owners to protect their own interests by being able to search the database to easily see whether other labels may be seeking to trade off their intellectual property so they can undertake appropriate civil action against copycat exporters. Now, anyone who is familiar or has a relationship with the wine industry would know that this is a significant issue for industry. This issue around copycats has certainly affected a lot of businesses in South Australia. So any work which seeks to address that is work that the Labor Party obviously would support. And particularly for the industry in South Australia, where some of our best-known brands globally and the most important wine exports for Australia are located. And in that note, I draw attention to a fantastic winemaker in the chamber at the moment in Senator Farrell, who I'm sure will be welcoming the provisions within this legislation. But of course this bill isn't enough sufficiently to do all we know that we need to do to be supporting our wine industry, because at the moment we're at a critical juncture in time for this industry, and this is particularly true in my home state of South Australia. The wine industry in South Australia suffered enormously in the recent bushfires, especially in the Adelaide Hills. The Cudley Creek fire that tore through the Hills region claimed 25,000 hectares. I went and visited Cudley Creek a few weeks ago and I was able to see the impact of this firsthand, in particular at Petaluma Winery in Woodside in the Adelaide Hills. Now, Petaluma was just one of dozens of affected wineries in this region, and the impact of the fire is clear to see, not just within Petaluma's property, but in the surrounding properties nearby. I witnessed blackened soils from eerie patterns on the ground showing the seemingly random path of the fire through the vines, where you'd see vines completely burned, vines which had been spared, areas where the fire appeared to jump certain parts of the property and certain parts of the vineyard. I saw vines shrivel to ash and buildings completely gutted in its wake. Grand centuries-old gum trees adjacent to the cellar door are now blackened through sections of their trunks. Some of these will survive with the scars a constant reminder, but others won't. Now, Petaluma estimates significant losses to production for the year, and yet this winery, Petaluma, was relatively fortunate if we compare it to other wineries in the hills. See, their cellar door is still intact, which means they can still welcome visitors, they can still showcase their wines, they can still be part of that critical tourism infrastructure which is so important to the Adelaide Hills. And of course they still have some vines for future production, but others have absolutely nothing left. Vintalopa was completely engulfed, losing all of their vines, their cellar door and even the owner's home. But across the Adelaide Hills, in true South Australian style, there is widespread resolve to rebuild and regroup. And it speaks volumes of the character of the wine industry that there is widespread determination to recover from this bushfire disaster. Listening to what some producers need through support recovery, what I heard clearly is that the recovery is only just beginning, and it will be a process that takes many, many years, and the industry will require our significant and long-term support. All wineries, of course, are different, and their recoveries will take different paths and they will have different needs. Some will need large distributors, like Coles and Woolworths, to be flexible with supply in the coming years so they can maintain important existing distribution agreements. Some will need weekend tourists to accept some reduced amenity whilst they're visiting for a while. What they will need is a continued effort from consumers to continue to buy local and to make a special effort to seek out local produce and local wines. And what they need desperately is the support of our Parliament. Though it is a long process and a difficult process ahead, there are signs of positivity, there are signs that this recovery is already underway. Vines that shrivelled in the bushfire heat but stayed alive are now pushing out small green bunches of new grapes. On the backdrop of the black earth, vibrant green grass shoots provide a stunning reminder of nature's incredible capacity to renew and regrow. And the winemakers are testing their fruit to assess the impact of the bushfire and the smoke aftermath on the quality of the fruit. The Australian Wine Research Institute will apply knowledge gained from previous bushfires to support producers through this disaster. And I want to put on the record what producers have been telling me, and that is just absolute praise for the Australian Wine Research Institute and the work they've been doing to actively support them. Now, as a parliament, we should be working to ensure practical support is provided to the right areas to help producers return to business as usual as quickly as is possible. And bills such as this are an important way to support the industry. But there are, of course, bigger issues as a nation that we must be tackling to be able to say with confidence that we are doing everything we can to support our wine industry, an industry which substantially provides for our broader economy. South Australia's 5 world-renowned wine regions in the Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale, Clare Valley, Coonawarra and the Adelaide Hills, as well as the other regions in our state that are producing top-quality wine, account for almost 80% of Australia's premium wine production. So protecting local South Australian wine brands is not just vital for our own state, for my state of South Australia, but it is vital for our national wine industry. In 2017-18, South Australia's wine industry generated more than $2 billion in revenue. $1.8 billion were from exports, exporting to more than 100 countries. Australian wine exports have continued to grow in the 12 months to June 2019, increasing by 4% in value to almost $3 billion. In 2017-18, Australia consumed over 400 million litres of wine, but exported more than 800 million litres, double the amount consumed locally. So clearly, this is a critical industry for our broader economy, and South Australia is charging and fuelling that industry and its growth. So at this time, especially now, at a time when our South Australian industry has been devastated by these unprecedented bushfires, we need to be doing everything we can to support our wine industry, to support our producers, and to support the people in South Australia whose jobs are dependent on the success of these businesses, on the exports of these businesses. That is absolutely critical. So we need to do more than just provide monetary support and short-term support schemes. We need a long-term plan, and we need to listen to people in this industry who are concerned about the broader changes for their industry ahead. And I'm speaking specifically there about the challenges that climate change will present to this industry and will present to producers. On 9 January 2020, the peak industry organisation, the Grape and Wine Association, provided an update on the impacts the bushfires have had on various wine-producing regions. To date, the fires have impacted more than 60 grape growers, and wine producers in the Adelaide Hills, and the flow-on effect within the region is going to be severe, clearly, with this level of impact. The devastation has hit close to home for growers, producers and wineries in the region, with significant losses of vineyards, buildings, equipment, machinery and wine. And equipment is an important part of that story, but of course with equipment, insurance often covers it. We can rebuild. The damage to the vines, the damage to the other parts of the infrastructure, the damage to the natural environment, the damage to the precious things which also were burnt cannot be replaced. After a challenging season of the extreme heat that was seen, of drought, of catastrophic bushfires, it is so clear that this industry is hurting. It is hurting deeply. And we have to be clear when we're talking about this, if we're going to be meaningful and actually impactful in the ways that we want to support this industry, that we acknowledge that the severity of this season, this bushfire season, and the extreme weather that exacerbated conditions has resulted from our changing climate. There's no stepping away from that. There is no stepping away from it. The science is very clear, and Australia's wine industry is on the front line of climate change. They have an incredible amount to lose if we do not take action on climate change seriously. Climate scientists warn the increasing challenges to grape growing reflect the vulnerabilities of the entire farming industry. As Professor Mark Howden, Director of the Climate Change Institute at the ANU recently stated, climate change is already having an impact, not just based on the amount of product they can grow, but also on the quality of product. our rapidly changing climate is having significant impacts on the agriculture sector more broadly, but of course particularly on our winemakers who want the government to act meaningfully on climate change. South Australian wine growers have stated that the dramatic shift in harvest dates is just one of the things which is taking a toll on their businesses. In response to this, they've invested significantly in irrigation, in solar and other measures to combat these challenges. But it's not a fight our producers can win on their own. It's not a fight any industry which is at risk from climate change, at risk that climate change will fundamentally affect their bottom line, their business, can tackle on their own. We have had expert warnings even a decade ago, just on the instance of these fires which have hit the industry, that these seasons would become longer and more intense, exacerbated by the forces of climate change. The government's own official emissions data last month confirmed Australia will not meet our Kyoto commitment to cut emissions by 5%. We are clearly not doing enough, and industry is clearly looking to government to show leadership in this. Industry sees what's happening with climate change. They see the risks to their industry, they see the risks to production, they see the changing nature of production that climate change will have. And this is so true for the wine industry, where very grapes are completely dependent on climatic conditions. So a change in the climate has a significant and direct impact on the wine industry and on our growers. This government, if they are serious about supporting our wine industry, beyond these measures which I support, I think they're practical and good steps, but if they're serious about supporting our industry into the long term, in addressing the serious challenges that are in front of the wine industry with respect to climate change, then they just need to do more. They need to do more. They need to join groups, old friends of theirs, the BCA, BP, BHP, Telstra, and come on board with net zero emissions by 2050. They need to come forward with a target, and then they need to develop a plan, a meaningful plan, which will take action on climate change, because this is something business needs. It's something our wine industry needs. Our wine industry cannot fight this fight on their own. They need government. We need to be setting a strategic direction. Our wine industry and the wine we produce are high-value products. They are known worldwide. The quality is known worldwide. And we need to protect this industry. We need to protect those products. And we need to do everything we can to ensure that they can focus on fighting the fights that they need to do. They need to focus on building their business and growing their business. And we actually need to take leadership on climate change. We need to take leadership on one of the biggest threats to their business going forward into the future. Of course, we also need to do, as I've said throughout my speech, so much more over the next few years to support this industry, especially in South Australia, especially in the Adelaide Hills, where the impact of the recent bushfires has just been truly, truly devastating. We need to support the industry there, not just now, not just in the next few months, but in the years and years ahead, because for our wine industry, that is when the impact is going to hit. That's the kind of lead times we're talking about in terms of the damage to their vines and their product getting out to market. So we need to be showing them our support over the next few years. They need to see a plan from us for this. They need to see a plan long-term on the critical issue of climate change, an issue which keeps them up at night in terms of how they're going to protect their businesses going forward, how they're going to protect their products going forward. That's what they're looking for from us. So I'm pleased to support this bill before us. I welcome it, and I welcome the practical steps it's taking to support our wine industry. But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture and the bigger discussion we need to be having in this chamber on how to support our wine industry post the bushfire and how we can support our wine industry by tackling the issue of climate change.